Men are sometimes divided into two classes, cultured and uncultured. The former, so far as they were worthy of their name, occupied themselves with thoughts, with mind, and, because in the time since Christ, of which the very principles thought they were the ruling ones, demanded a servile respect for the thoughts recognized by them. State, emperor, church, God, morality, order, are such thoughts or spirits that exist only for the mind. A merely living being, an animal, cares as little for them as a child. But the uncultured are really nothing but children, and he who attends only to the necessities of his life is indifferent to those spirits. But, because he is also weak before them, he succumbs to their power, and is ruled by thoughts. That is the meaning of hierarchy. Hierarchy is dominion of thoughts, dominion of mind. We are hierarchic to this day, kept down by those who are supported by thoughts. Thoughts are the sacred. But the two are always clashing, now one and now the other, giving the offense. And this clash occurs not only in the collision of two men, but in one and the same man. For no cultured man is so cultured as to not find enjoyment in things too, and so be uncultured, and no uncultured man is totally without thoughts. In Hegel, it comes to the light as last with a longing for things even the most cultured man has, and what a horror of every hollow theory he harbors. With him, reality, the world of things, is altogether to correspond to the thought, and no concept is to be without reality. This caused Hegel's system to be known as the most objective, as if in it thought and things celebrated their union. But this was simply the extremest case of violence on the part of thought, its highest pitch of despotism and sole dominion, the triumph of mind, and with the triumph of philosophy. Philosophy cannot hereafter achieve anything higher, for its highest is the omnipotence of mind, the almightiness of mind. Spiritual men have taken into their head something that is to be realized. They have concepts of love, goodness, etc., which they would like to see realized. Therefore, they want to set up a kingdom of love on earth, which no one any longer acts from selfishness, but each one from love. Love is to rule. What they have taken into their head, what shall we call it but fixed idea? Why, their head is haunted. The most oppressive spook is man. Think of the proverb, the road to ruin is paved with good intentions. The intention to realize humanity altogether in oneself, being altogether man, is of such ruinous kind. Here belong the intentions to become good, noble, loving, etc. In the sixth part of the Denkenwürdigengedein, part 7, Bruno Baer says the middle class, which was to receive such a terrible importance for modern history, is capable of no self-sacrificing action, no enthusiasm for an idea, no exultation. It devotes itself to nothing but the interests of its mediocrity, i.e., it remains always limited to itself and conquers at last only through its bulk, with which it has succeeded in tiring out the efforts of passion, enthusiasm, consistency, through its surface into which it absorbs a part of the new ideas. And it has turned the revolutionary ideas for which not it, but unselfish or impassioned men sacrificed themselves solely to its own profit, has turned spirit into money. That is, to be sure, after it had taken away from those ideas their point, their consistency, their destructive seriousness, fanatical against all egoism. These people, then, are not self-sacrificing, not enthusiastic, not idealistic, not consistent, not zealots. They are egoists in the usual sense, selfish people, looking out for their advantage, sober, calculating, etc. Who, then, is self-sacrificing? In the full sense, surely, he who ventures everything else for one thing, one object, one will, one passion. Is not the lover self-sacrificing who forsakes father and mother, endures all dangers and privations to reach his goal? Or the ambitious man who offers up all his desires, wishes, and satisfactions to the single passion? Or the avaricious man who denies himself everything to gather treasures? Or the pleasure seeker, etc.? He is ruled by passion to which he brings the rest as sacrifices. And are these self-sacrificing people perchance not selfish, not egoist? As they have only one ruling passion, so they provide for only one satisfaction. For this, the more strenuously they are wholly absorbed in it. Their entire activity is egoistic, but it is a one-sided, unopened, narrow egoism. It is possessiveness. Why, those are petty passions, by which, on the contrary, man must not let himself be enthralled. Man must make sacrifices for a great idea, a great cause. A great idea, a good cause is, it may be, the honor of God, for which innumerable people have met death. Christianity, which has found its willing martyrs, the Holy Catholic Church, which has greedily demanded sacrifices of heretics, liberty, and equality, which were waited on by bloody guillotines. He who lives for a great idea, a good cause, a doctrine, a system, a lofty calling, may not let any worldly lusts, any self-seeking interests spring up in him. Here we have the concept of clericalism, or as it may also be called in its pedagogic activity, schoolmaster lines. The idealist play the schoolmaster over us. The clergyman is especially called to live to the idea and to work for the idea, the truly good cause. Therefore the people feel how little it benefits him to show worldly haughtiness, to desire good living, to join in such pleasures as dancing and gaming, in short, to have any other than a sacred interest. Hence, too, doubtless is derived the sanctity salary of teachers, or to feel themselves repaid by the sacredness of their calling alone, and to renounce other enjoyments. Even a directory of the sacred ideas, one or more of which man is to look upon as his calling, is not lacking. Family, fatherland, science, etc., may find in me a servant faithful to his calling. Here we may come up the old craze of the world, which has not yet learned to do with clericalism, that to live and work for an idea is man's calling, and according to the faithfulness of its fulfillment, his human worth is measured. This is the dominion of the idea. In other words, it is clericalism. Thus Robespierre and Saint Just were priests and through, inspired by the idea, enthusiasts, consistent instruments of this idea, idealistic men. So Saint Just exclaims in a speech, "There's something terrible in the sacred love of country. It is so exclusive that it sacrifices everything to the public interest, without mercy, without fear, without human consideration. It hurls Menelaus down the precipice. It sacrifices its private inclinations. It leads Regulus to the Carthage, throws a Roman into the chasm, and sets Marat as a victim of his devotion in the Pantheon. Now over against these representatives of ideal or sacred interest stands a world of innumerable personal, profane interests. No idea, no system, no sacred cause is so great as never to be outrivaled and modified by these personal interests. Even if they are silent momentarily and in times of rage and fanaticism, yet they soon come uppermost against through the sound sense of the people. Those ideas do not completely conquer till they are no longer hostile to personal interests, till they satisfy egoism. The man who is just now crying herrings in front of my widow has a personal interest in good sales, and, if his wife or anybody else wishes him the like, this remains a personal interest all the same. If one, on the other hand, a thief, deprived him of his basket, then there would at once arise an interest of many, of the whole city, of the whole country, or, in a word, of all who abhor theft, an interest in which the herring seller's person would become indifferent, and its place, the category of the robbed man, would come into the background. But even here, all might yet resolve itself into a personal interest, each of the partakers reflecting that he must concur in the punishment of the thief, because unpunished stealing might otherwise become general and cause him to lose his own. Such calculation, however, can hardly be assumed on the part of many, and we shall call rather here the cry that the thief is a criminal. Here we have before us a judgment, the thief's action receiving its expression in the concept crime. Now the matter stands thus: even if a crime did not cause the slightest damage either to me or to any one of those in whom I take an interest, I should nevertheless denounce it. Why? Because I am enthusiastic for morality, filled with the idea of morality. What is hostile to it I everywhere assail, because in his mind theft ranks as abominable, without any question. Proudhon thinks that with this sentence, property is theft, he has at once put a brand on property. In the sense of the priestly, theft is always a crime, or at least a misdeed. Here the personal interest is at an end. The particular person who has stolen the basket is perfectly indifferent to my prison. It is only the thief, this concept of which the person presents a specimen, that I take an interest in. The thief and man are in my mind irreconcilable opposites, for one is not truly man when one is a thief. One degrades man, or humanity, in himself when one steals. Dropping out of personal concern, one gets into philanthropy, friendliness to man, which is usually misunderstood as if it was a love to men, to each individual, while it is nothing but a love of man. The unreal concept, the spook, is not tue anthropus, men, but ton anthropon, man, that is the philanthropist carries to his heart. To be sure, he cares for each individual, but only because he wants to see his beloved ideal realized everywhere. So there is nothing said here of care for me. You, us, that would be personal interest, and belongs under the head of worldly love. Philanthropy is a heavenly, spiritual, a priestly love. Man must be restored in us, even if thereby we poor devils should come to grief. It is the same priestly principle as that famous fiat justitia peri mundu. Man and justice are ideas, ghosts, for love of which everything is sacrificed. Therefore, the priestly spirits are the self-sacrificing ones. He who is infatuated with man leaves persons out of account so far as that infatuation extends and floats in an ideal sacred interest. Man, you see, is not a person, but an ideal, a spook. Now, things as different as possible can belong to man, and be so regarded if one finds man's chief requirement in piety. There arises religious clericalism. If one sees in it morality, then moral clericalism raises its head. On this account, the priestly spirits of our day want to make a religion of everything, a religion of liberty, religion of equality, etc. For them, every idea becomes a sacred cause, e.g., even citizenship, politics, publicity, freedom of the press, trial by jury, etc. Now, what does unselfishness mean in this sense, having only an ideal interest before which no respect of person avails? The stiff head of the worldly man opposes this, but for centuries has always been worsted, at least so far as to have bent the unruly neck and honor the higher power. Clericalism pressed down when the worldly egoist had shaken off a higher power, e.g., the Old Testament law, the Roman Pope, etc. Then at once a 7 times higher one was over him again, e.g., faith in the place of the law, the transformation of all laymen into divines in place of the limited body of clergy, etc. His experience was like that of the possessed man into whom 7 devils passed when he thought he had freed himself from one. In the passage quoted above, all ideality is denied to the middle class. It certainly schemed against the ideal consistency with which Robespierre wanted to carry out the principle. The instinct of his interest told it that this consistency harmonized too little with what its mind was set on, and that it would be acting against itself if it were willing to further the enthusiasm for principle. Was it to behave so unselfishly as to abandon all its aims in order to bring a harsh theory to its triumph? It suits the priests admirably, to be sure, when people listen to their summons. Cast away everything and follow me, or sell all that thou hast and give to the poor, and thou shalt have treasure in heaven. Come, follow me. Some decided idealists obey this call, but most act like Ananias and Sapphira, and maintaining a behavior half clerical or religious and half worldly, God and mammon. I do not blame the middle class for not wanting to let its aims be frustrated by Robespierre, i.e., for inquiring of its egoism how far it might give the revolutionary idea a chance. But one might blame, if blame were in place here anyhow, those who let their own interests be frustrated by the interests of the middle class. However, will not they likewise sooner or later learn to understand what is to their advantage? August Becker says, to win the producers, proletarians, a negation of the traditional conception of right is by no means enough. Folks, unfortunately, care little for the theoretical victory of the idea. One must demonstrate to them ad oculos how this victory can be practically utilized in life. And on page 32, you must get hold of folks by their real interests if you want to work upon them. Immediately after this, he shows how a fine looseness of morals is already spreading among our peasants because they prefer to follow their real interests rather than the commands of morality. Because the revolutionary priests of school or schoolmasters served man, they cut off the heads of men. The revolutionary laymen, those outside the sacred circle, did not feel any greater horror of cutting off heads, but were less anxious about the rights of man than about their own. How comes it, though, that the egoism of those who affirm personal interest and always inquire of it is nevertheless forever succumbing to a priestly or schoolmastery ideal interest? Their person seems to them too small, too insignificant, and is so, in fact, to lay claim to everything and to be able to put itself completely in force. There is a sure sign of this in their dividing themselves into two persons, an external and a temporal, and always caring either only for the one or only for the other, on Sunday for the external, on the workday for the temporal, in prayer for the former, in work for the latter. They have the priest in themselves, therefore they do not get rid of him, but hear themselves lectured inwardly every Sunday. How men struggle and calculated to get at a solution regarding these dualistic essences? Ideas followed upon idea, principle upon principle, system upon system, and none knew how to keep down permanently the contradiction of the worldly man, the so-called egoist. Does not this prove that all those ideas were too feeble to take up my whole will into themselves and satisfy it? They were and remained hostile to me, even if the hostility lay concealed for a considerable time. Will it be the same with self-ownership? Is it too only an attempt at mediation? Whatever principle I turn to, it might be to that of reason. I always had to turn away from it again. Or can I always be rational, arrange my life according to reason in everything? I can, no doubt, strive after rationality. I can love it, just as I can also love God and every other idea. I can be a philosopher, a lover of wisdom, as I love God. But what I love, what I strive for, is only in my idea, my conception, my thoughts. It is my heart. My head is in me like the heart, but it is not. I am not it. To the activity of priestly minds belongs especially what one often hears called moral influence. Moral influence takes its start where humiliation begins. Yes, it is nothing else than this humiliation itself, the breaking and bending of the temper, down to the humility. If I call to someone to run away when a rock is to be blasted, I exert no moral influence by this demand. If I say to a child, "You will go hungry if you will not eat what is put on the table," that is not moral influence. But if I say to it, "You will pray, honor your parents, respect the crucifix, speak the truth, for this belongs to man as is man's calling," or even, "This is God's will," the moral influence is complete. Then a man is to bend before the calling of man, be tractable, become humble, give up his will for an alien one which is set up as rule and law. He is to abase himself before something higher, self-abasement. He that abaseth himself shall be exalted. Yes, yes, children must early be made to practice piety, goodliness, and propriety. A person of good breeding is one into whom good maxims have been instilled and impressed, poured in through a funnel, thrashed in and preached in. If one shrugs his shoulders at this, and once the good wring their hands despairingly and cry, "But for heaven's sake, If one is to give children no good instruction, why then they will run straight into the jaws of sin and become good-for-nothing hoodlums. Gently, you prophets of evil. Good for nothing in your sense they certainly will become, but your sense happens to be a very good for nothing sense. The impudent lads will no longer let anything be whined and chattered into them by you. You have no sympathy for all the follies for which you have been raving and driveling since the memory of man began. They will abolish the law of inheritance. They will be willing to inherit your stupidities as you inherited them from your fathers. They destroy inherited sin. If you command them, bend before the Most High, they will answer, if he wants to bend us, let him come himself and do it. We, at least, will not bend of our own accord. And if you threaten with this wrath and his punishment, they will take it like being threatened with the boogeyman. If you are no more successful in making them afraid of ghosts, then the dominion of ghosts is at an end, and nurses' tales find no faith. And is it not precisely the liberals again that press for good education and improvement of the educational system? For how could their liberalism, their liberty within the bounds of law, come without discipline? Even if they do not exactly educate to the fear of God, yet they demand the fear of man all the more strictly and awaken enthusiasm for the truly human calling by discipline.